November 12th. I have a Rotarian of the Day volunteer. My company.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the organization. Okay, so prayer first. Dear Lord, bow bless, dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the veterans that we have in this world, and for Colonel Joan Abelman, who's able to be here with us today to present. We ask that you look after us as a club and as our community. Amen. Okay, in prayer. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, 4 ways in. First,
It is true.
second,
It is fair all concerned.
third,
With the will benefit
fourth,
will be beneficial to all concerned.
fifth.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, as you sit down, don't forget the blue buckets. Put some change in there for Alzheimer's research. And last week we had $16, so maybe you could have a couple of $10 matches. Okay, Barry? Anyone else? Okay. Mary. And I'll do one too. Okay, do we have visitors?
I have Dr. Matthew Tuck. This is our new orthopedic person here in town. Him and his family have moved to the community, and I just wanted to get to know everybody. You know, come by and say,
Any prayer requests? Thank you. Okay, just to remind you, November 18th was the 83rd anniversary of the presentation of the official charter for our Rotary Club. So we're celebrating our 83rd anniversary this month. Next week will be a club assembly. So we're going to break up into our committees, and at the end, maybe committees can report out where they're at with things. Aaron, do you have an announcement?
Okay, I'd like to let everybody know, if you haven't seen it online, we're having a festival. I'm co-hosting a festival this weekend. It's the Simply Southern Barnyard Festival. It's the first time ever we've done it. We kind of brought it about to help small businesses to recoup some of their losses from this year, and it'll be at the Simply Southern Barn, which is at 135 Fort Drive. Fort Drive is directly off of Meriwether Road. So it'll be Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 6 Saturday, 12 to 5 on Sunday, and we will have Tom Glover's son, Sam, will be out there providing entertainment with pianos. We'll have various entertainment, and then we'll have a little concert each day from 2 to 5.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, Greg, can you come up front, please? Fellow Rotarians, it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome into our membership to our club Greg, whose name was proposed by Jennifer Pollard. Can't be here because she's flooded out at Lockerly. The proposal has been reviewed in accordance to the Constitution and bylaws of the club, and now I ask you to proceed as we admit you into the membership of the Rotary Club of Milledgeville, and so to the Fellowship of Rotary throughout the world. It's already been explained to you that the ideal of Rotary is service. Our principal motto is service above self, and the object of this club and all Rotary clubs is to encourage and foster this ideal as a basis of worthy enterprise. You have agreed to accept the obligations attached to your membership in the club and to obey the club's constitution and bylaws. And now I'm going to pin the Rotary emblem on you, which we expect you to wear with pride. Congratulations. else? Aaron, you want to introduce our guest?
Okay, so if y'all haven't figured me out by now, you know I like to kind of theme our presentations when I can. This week's presentation is in honor of Veterans Day. That's why you'll see flags on the table if you'd like to take the American flag with pale pen. Our guest today, I wanted a veteran to speak this week, and I was hoping to get maybe a different story that we haven't heard before. And I happen to have a very wonderful friend, Colonel Joni Abelman. She is a small woman, but she has a big fame, so I can't wait to hear her presentation today about her service.
So this is gonna be a fun thing. Let's see, let me make sure and I brought my fan club with me, Pete. Okay. We're gonna start off with a quick film about Veterans Day. Land.
Might take a second.
Okay.
Here we go. Our Wi-Fi is a little slow here.
We'll get there. Took a while ago. Starting to play.
It's having trouble keeping up.
There we go.
Now the volume's not.
Any sound?
Nice. We're gonna have to reset the sound, I think.
Okay, while he's doing that, who are the veterans in the room? Okay, can you all stand up and tell me what branch?
Army.
Army. What?
United States Army.
Oh my gosh. I have one slide that you got to know about.
Sure.
Yay, fine. Okay, those are the veterans. Oh, sorry.
Go Army.
Go Army. Oh, my.
Navy.
Yeah. I know none of you have ever had a PowerPoint before.
Thank you very much.
A lot of people ask me why I joined the Air Force. Just tell them why I joined the Air Force. I graduated from college. My parents, I was fortunate, they could send me to college, but they gave me two choices. I could become a teacher or a nurse, because back in those days, if you were a teacher or a nurse, you would have a career. Well, I figured if I was a nurse, I'd hurt somebody, and I wisely chose, I figured I wouldn't hurt the children, so I got my degree in teaching. And after I got my degree, I woke up with a very bad eye problem. I couldn't see doing it for the rest of my life. I just couldn't see it. So I didn't know what to do, and I had two women living in my apartment. To tell you how old I am, they were in uniform. I asked if they were in the Air Force or were they meter maids. That we had meter maids back then. And they explained it was the Air Force. So they told me, they invited me to their apartment. They showed me all the neat things, the travels they had been, and all the things that they had done. And I went, wow, you know, I could do that, at least for a while. So I joined the Air Force, but I kind of forgot to tell my parents because I knew they would never approve. And back then, not many women were in the Air Force. And I know if I said I joined the Air Force, they would kind of say, what is your problem? So I didn't tell them until it was time to go. That did not go over well. But anyway, so I joined the Air Force. I went to OTS, and my roommate over there toward the right, her name was Jennifer Swisky, rhymes with whiskey. First thing she ever said, some things you never forget. So I went to SOS, and then there were 9 women there, and 4 of us were selected to go to intelligence school. And I'm going to show 3 of the 4 women over here. That was our first dining out. We were all fired up, ready to go. At Intel school, I learned the most important lesson of my career. Never trust a pilot. What he tells you. I was out to bring aircraft recognition and aircraft parts to the senior officers at intelligence school, and there's a pitot tube on an airplane that measures the airspeed. He explained to me it was a grass sniffer, and when the airplane got near the grass, that's when it knew to take off. And I went, wow. You know, later, what if there's no grass? You know, how does the airplane know to take off? I briefed that to intelligence. So after that, I still graduated. I think I had to do extracurricular. And again, I joined because I wanted to travel, see, have fun, excitement. I better be more specific what I say when I do that, because I went over somewhere right around in here to South Korea, my first assignment. And I'm going to tell you the other thing I learned, and every assignment was like this. It's lonely, especially if you're a woman. And my next slide, please. I am here, the only female of a 300-man fighter unit. Here I'm with the officers, and it was quite an experience. I wasn't quite ready for it, but I handled it. The other thing I learned is when I was there, was I kind of groped? It was, times were not politically correct. They kind of did whatever they wanted. So was I groped? Yes. Am I traumatized? No. Are some of the guys traumatized? What I did with them? I think they still could be. And I'm sorry, they brought it on themselves. They should have been better for us. So anyway, here I am. Next slide, please. Not only am I the only woman, I'm the shortest woman. And as an intel officer, every morning, I gave the first intel brief at 7 o'clock in the morning. I do this today, but I have my heels on and I might fall off. I was younger then. I stood on a bullet box behind the podium every morning. It was so much fun. That's what you asked for. Okay, next slide. Now, one thing I also learned is women's uniforms were inadequate. Men wore their fatigues, women weren't authorized fatigues. So the guys, the first day I showed my little blue dusters and little utility blouse, ugly. And the guys that I worked with very wisely took me down to men's clothing because there's no women's clothing. We got me a pair of fatigues, And we took them to Joni, the tailor, who form-fitted them. Did not flatter my figure that much. But I figured since it's illegal for me to be wearing this uniform, I might as well let my hair hang, because I told all the guys, when you women wear the fatigues, they can let their hair hang. Well, the men, nobody hated me enough to look up the rules. So I kind of got away with it. And it was still friends. I still have friends from over there. You do think, but being the only female, oh, no bathroom facilities for women. Oh, forgot to mention that. That was another little challenge. But I survived. And to reward me, Air Force realized I'd been in an all-man squadron. My next job was a WAF commander. Now I am in charge of the women. The women work for the men, but I was there for administrative purposes, disciplinary purposes, and all the other things. It was a challenge, and this was back in 1974, and they at that time decided to integrate the women into the units, and the men had a discipline. Well, that kind of scared me because I knew what all I'd gotten by with, and I went, oh dear, this is going to be ugly. So anyway, I had, next slide, I was here, I'm briefing to the ladies. We decided to do a fashion show at staff meeting, and again, being lonely, only female at staff meeting, of course. I was as a commander. So we did a fashion show, and I told all the rules, you know, wear your hair up, no skirt more than 2 inches above the knee, and all the other requirements. Then, knowing these men are tricksters, I gave them a test. And I'll never forget one man's answer. The question is, how high above the knee can a woman wear her skirt? And he wrote 24 inches. Now, I don't have 24 inches to my waist, so I don't think we need to assign any women to him right now. But Effie Warren was a wonderful base. I was the first to disband the women's unit. And then my next job was, I don't think this was a good title. I was the advisor to the wing commander for the affairs of women. Now I said, you know, we need to change that title. That doesn't sound right. But I advised them on, and the commanders on any issues they had dealing with the women. Okay, next slide. Now, a good thing happened when I was in Cheyenne. I met this West Point grad, went Air Force. Colonel Abelman, the original Colonel Abelman, and we got married. So we are now off to Riverside. He got an assignment to Riverside, California. Now I go from Cheyenne, Wyoming, snowstorm, to Riverside, California, when we had a house with tennis court, swimming pool, to tennis court, swimming pool, just everything was great. So in Cheyenne, it was kind of an uneventful trip, except I learned some of the challenges of being a spouse. I was working full time, and I had some of the spouses, Aaron, I thought I had it turned on. Some of the spouses come and come and explain to me that they had been doing my job before I got there. I said I didn't know I had a job before I got there, hosting parties and having luncheons and stuff. Well, not me. So anyway, that was, and then Bob got his share when we went to SOS. I was going to SOS, and he got a letter saying, "Dear wife of Captain Abelman, you are expected to support your husband while he's at SOS. Good. And you can do this because you are required to make cookies." Now, Bob was not a cookie baker. And I said, okay, you better start learning to bake cookies because I don't want to be the only spouse who doesn't support me by baking cookies. And he said, doesn't a spouse do more to support a husband than make cookies? And I said, I think so. So anyway, I now go off to SOS. Next slide. And here I am again, the only female with the crowd. Now, this was a pretty good trip. I learned a lot. But one night after class, we all went to the club. And one of the gentlemen, back then we had payphones, went in, put in all his little quarters, called my husband and said, "Do you know your wife is at the club having a beer with the men?" And Bob said, "Are these the men from her squadron?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Are they all there?" "Yeah." He said, "Good. She's exactly where she belongs." You know, but there's always one. Now from SOS, I got a wonderful assignment And it was to Bergstrom Air Force Base. I love Bergstrom. Of course, I'm from Texas, so I'm University of Texas, hook 'em horns. So I was so excited about going back there. The strange thing, I had several jobs in this building over many years. The neat thing about this building is it's round and it has bats. And the bats, you'll have bat alert, and the bats are flying through and everyone's diving for their offices and closing the doors. And it's now a Hilton at the airport. I just wonder if it still has bats at the Hilton, but it probably does. That was a wonderful assignment. Next thing, I was the Headquarter Squadron Commander, in charge of all the administrative of the Headquarter Squadron. Once again, I'm kind of like right out there by myself. And it was a great assignment. I had the greatest bosses. And one thing I can say, fortunate in my career, I worked for really fantastic men. Thank you. But anyway, it was a great assignment. And I had the guy who was destined to be the next chief of the Air Force was my boss. He said, Joan, and Bob says, I'm tired. I don't want to be a camp cobbler. Get out. I said, okay. And Stanton Armbruster, I forget his name, said, Joni, I'll drag you and Bob with me everywhere we go, and you'll have a fantastic career. It'll be great. And Bob said, well, you can do that, or I can give you a summer in Europe. And I said, well, a summer in Europe kind of sounds like fun too. So I got out and did traveled extensively with Bob, which is good because he later died. I was glad we had that time together. But now, two places made significant impact mentally and as a veteran and futuristically. One, okay, Army guys, who was the last living 5-star general?
Marshall.
No?
Miranda.
Whoa, good.
Oh, yes.
Who said it?
Well,
Okay, whoever said
I
it.
do my voice over there.
Okay.
But I was right there with you.
Okay, next slide.
Yes,
At a West Point class reunion, I got to meet General Bradley. And can I tell him what he did? He said I can't. One of the pictures I had taken, my eyes were like that. Because he always says, "Let me put my arm around you," and he'd take his time, put his arm around me. And the last one he did, he gave me a little pat. So my claim to fame, I don't know whether to be honored or insulted, but either way, I thought it was wonderful. So anyway, I got to meet Colonel Bradley, and he would come to the club. We were up there, and it was a class reunion. Bobby graduated 30 years ago. So they had a lot of catching up to do for 30 years. So we were up till 2 or 3 in the morning. They would wheel General Bradley in, turn off his hearing aid, and he'd just sit there and just sip his brandy and smile and have the best old time. Okay, the other significant thing that happened, I didn't know this was fortuitous. We were going over to Canada on vacation. Bob carried a pistol. And so when we got to the border, he said, do you have any weapons? And Bob said, yeah, sure. And they went, can't come. So we said, what to do? And Bob said, you know, there's one of the best secrets in the Air Force. We have a base at Niagara Falls. So we drove out to the base at Niagara Falls. And I went, what a pretty little base with nice people. And we left our weapons there, went up to Canada, came back, got weapons. Little did I know. Okay, next slide. When I got back, I went back into the reserve unit just in time to become a communications commander and be just in time to get a deployment to Norway. It was cold. I was miserable. I wish back for Korea. But I'm only there for 2 weeks. And the only claim to fame I can say, next slide on this, is I stood on the Arctic Circle. I have a certificate to prove it. And I saw the Northern Lights. But other than that, it was miserable. Okay, next slide. Okay, the other good thing happened. About being a woman, occasionally it pays off. Best ball golf tournament, men walk me on their team. I'm not a good golfer, but I can occasionally just hit it a little bit. But if you hit from the women's teams on best ball, that makes you a champion. So here I am hitting the golf tournament. Of course, it did help that the guy over on the right was a scrap, had a 2 handicap. But other than that, we did pretty good. Okay, next slide. Now I am off. I want to go full time. And I put in for an application to become they're called an ART, Air Reserve Technician. You are a civilian during the week, you wear a uniform, and on the weekend during drill, you become military. You're back to the military status. And luckily, the head personnel who knew me very well, and when I got a really good score, he met up with this guy, John J. Batney Jr., who said, I need an exec, I need one bad, but every time I pull up the roster, I'm not gonna hire these people. And he said, I got just the person. So unknown, John J. Batney Jr. calls me up on the phone and says, Joni, I got a job for you. You're coming to Seymour Johnson. Don't know anybody at Seymour Johnson. It's lonely. So I go on up there. The only thing I remember he told me, it takes 60 minutes, 2 hours to walk 60 minutes in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and it did. And it was go ahead, KC-10 unit. Now, John J. Batney, his wife became my good friend. And one thing I learned about senior officers, lots of times it's not the problem that's a problem. It's who brings the problem to the senior officer. Because as long as they don't know about it, it's no problem. If you bring it to them, you're the problem. You're the one causing the problem. Well, one day I went in and I explained a lot of issues that were going on that I thought he needed to be taken care of. Now, this is back day. This is 1990. Computers weren't fancy like they are now. This guy was a computer genius. Anyway, his wife called me that night. She said, what did you do to John today? I said, I brought him a few problems. I don't think he liked to hear about them. She said, he's in there on his computer muttering, saying very bad things about you. The next day, now this is a larger version of it. This was hanging on my door. Enter this office at your own risk. I said, that was pretty good. At my retirement, I made him sign that. Anyway, he was a great boss. I ended up being one of the vice commanders, the Air Force Reserve, a great guy. And you'll see some pictures of him later. But one of the neatest thing is I got to fly in the KC-10, which was our airplane, lay in the back, watch the boomers drop the boom on the refueling. Oh my God. And then I got to go sit in the cockpit. And I remember Joe Powell was the main pilot and says, hey, Joni, you want to fly this? And I was like, I don't want to crash. This is not a good thing. So anyway, it was a great assignment at Seymour Johnson. Then I got my next assignment, and I never asked for any of my assignments. They kind of like came to me. And if you can see the size of this guy, General Smith here's me. This is later on in life, but he's a big guy, and he is an F-16 pilot, tough as nails. And everybody said, Joni, you might as well have a public hanging. He's going to kill you dead. You are going to just be dog meat. Well, I learned my job was director of quality for the numbered air force. We had 3 air forces, and we had like 14 units assigned to us. So I was advisor to the unit on quality, and I was supposed to implement the quality program based off Xerox and Ford to our senior staff. Team from hell, colonels and generals who nearly get into a fist fight every time they got through, much less cooperating on doing what I didn't want to do. So next slide. We went and studied Baldridge under Deming, and that was on his 92nd birthday, and I'm there with some of the commanders. Anyway, here's some members of Team from Hell. Next slide. Now that's when they liked me after that. But we had a competition where everybody went through a Baldridge criteria of the Air Force. 3 numbered Air Force generals are very competitive. And I managed to get us the best score. I worked with our general. I trained him what to say, good grief. I would take highlights of a book when he was getting on the airplane. And you can't tell them anything because they know it all. So you highlight your book, and they read it. And every now and then I give them little books with pictures. You know, the 1 Minute Monkey Meets the Manager is after a couple of little books. And when they come back, they'd say, hey, I want to get these for all my commanders. These are good books. Then I'd highlight parts of what I needed to implement. And when I really made a breakthrough, when they came back and they highlighted parts of what they thought I should be doing. So I said, okay, it's working. And it was working really good. Next slide. This is General Turner. I was falling down when I did that. It looks weird. He was one of the commanders at Homestead when that hurricane hit. So I was brought down to work with the team at Homestead. And here's the next picture. You can see this is a year after the hurricane. It was really, really bad. So I survived that, and I went then to Air War College. I think there's my guys, and there's me in the back of the room. I became advisor to the general. That's him with several of the generals there. I become advisor, and he'd sit me back in the room, and then I would give him advice. He said, what really happened? You know, what did you see? What really was going on? So I was, at that time, went from scum of the earth to beloved child. Went then to Air War College, which was a fantastic year. We studied senior warfare with the Navy, the Army, everybody, the armed forces. And it was probably one of the most fantastic times of my life. We went on a trip, and you had to study that area, and it was the Middle East for me. So I got the Middle East, not by choice, but I went on the trip. And next slide. And you can see here, now this was an old Damascus. We went into Syria, Jordan, and Israel. This is old Damascus. And here we were served at a table by little people, midgets, because you had little chairs. And it was whirling dervishes and music, and it was right out of the Arabian Nights. And then here's with me and the senior generals. I had bodyguards assigned to me. The guys nicknamed my bodyguards the Thugs. They always joked, who's going to bodyguard Joni against the bodyguards? Then we went into Jordan, was our next trip. And I had good bodyguards. We named them Rambo 1, 2, and 3. Now, remember the Indiana Jones movie where they come in with the whip and the stuff? This is at Petra in there where it was filmed. Here's part of the films of Petra. And here's my favorite part, me with the camel smiling for the picture right in the camel. And then the next day we were supposed to go to Army War College. Whoopee-doo, I can't wait. Wow. We all got on the bus. Next slide. And they said, we have a change of plan. We're going to King Hussein's castle. And I mean, like, oh my gosh. So we all went out. Instead of whoopee-doo, we were, yeah. And we went in and we got briefed by, he wasn't there, but his brother, the Crown Prince, was there. He took us into the briefing room, served us tea and all these goodies, and read us the letters between the United States President and Joan King Hussein. It was a fantastic experience. Here's one of the Royal Guards there. Then, next slide. This is a night of Joni and the Jordanian generals. We're in a cave. I don't know if you can see it, but it's all lit with fires and lights, and there's spits, and they're cooking the food over it. And what got me on this night was they were first some of the charmingest men I ever met. But this guy, this little started saying, okay, you take a picture with Joni. You take a picture with Joni. Put your arm around her when you take a picture of her. And I went, you're having too much fun. You're just having too much fun. And he went, I said, why are we doing this? He said, honey, we're all up for top general bribery material. I can use this against them. So we took his camera away from him. Now, at Air War College, you belong to the government. Everything you do belongs to the government. I was put in for top paper at the end. It was called Challenges to U.S.-Russian Cooperation in the Manned Space Program. Okay, I went there, wrote the paper. I didn't win. That's fine, good. 9 years later, fast forward, when I was dating Pete, I was starting to fall for him. So I decided to Google him, find out a little more about him. And I Googled myself. I figured maybe he's doing the same to me. And I found out they were selling my paper for $32.95. And I went, oh my God. So I went to a lawyer and said, don't I get any of that money? And he goes, no. And so now, right before this, I Googled me again to see if there's something bad in there that any of you all might see. And there wasn't. So they're now selling it with BioScholar for $60. I got this at $49. It was on sale. Anyway, and I have the original with all the typos. It would have been much better. Anyway, in Israel had the most impressive military you've ever seen. You had to go to the Elvis Presley restaurant in Israel, and then the Wailing Wall. So now I'm off to my next assignment, and I'm going to Robins Air Force Base. And there, the boss that I had worked for, the one that they said you might as well hang yourself, was working there, and he hired me to come up. And then there, I got promoted to general. That was the first guy who hired me in. That was the guy who was my boss at the time. Got promoted to colonel, and got an assignment to, watch what you like, watch what you wish for, Niagara Falls. So I am now up, don't know one person in Niagara Falls, get up there. Now it was really interesting. I got to deal with mafia, I got to deal with FBI, I got to deal with nuclear weapons landing on the base unannounced. We never had any airplane crashes, protesters. And I took the job because I was gonna be in charge of the fire department. I said, maybe I could ride a fire truck. Well, I got to drive the fire truck. I had the police working for me, personnel, communications, civil engineers, the clubs, at the club, the lodging, the gym. It was a challenging job. My 8th day was, I get in around 7, 8 in the morning, and I would finish up around 10 o'clock at night. And occasionally the firemen about once a week would come and take me to the firehouse, and I'd have dinner with them, and that was always fun. But it was cold in Niagara. Next slide. It was cold. So when somebody back at headquarters said, Joni, would you want to come be head of strategic planning for us? I went, yes, yes, yes. So I went and took this easy job, 8 to 5, I couldn't wait. And it was 4 exercises a year where we exercised war planning. We worked the war plans, and I did the strategic planning. So, great, I said yes. About a year after I got there, 9/11 hit. And guess who's head of war mobilization? My life went to hell. I was headed out to Denver when my phone went crazy. I got back, and it took me 4 hours to get to the base, 4 hours. And people were running out food and stuff. Anyway, I got there. Luckily, I had nice, clean clothes. 4 days later, I went home. No sleep, no anything. We had cots built in my room because we had all classified information and all the war plans. So the first day I had off was in February. That year, we worked every single day. And then I realized, because we had to have manning, I would go home every Friday night and cook food, so we'd have food when the guys didn't have to go out and get stuff, or the gals didn't have to go out and get stuff. And then suddenly, there were all these people showing up to help. And I couldn't understand why. And they all came out, they wanted the free food. I went, come on, guys, that's not good. So anyway, I survived this job. And I retired. That after about 4 years of that, it was enough to retire. We had mobilized over 25,000 people, and the job was really a rough job. Now, after I retired, I was in the civilian force for a while. I got out of it now. I sell barns and sheds, and it is just such a delight. And you meet the nicest people, and there is no pressure. It is just wonderful. Now, quickly, I'm going to talk about some people that you may not know, and I want to make sure I get all these right. Army, you Army guys know who Joni Ernst is. Company Commander, Iowa, I think. She is Lieutenant Colonel. She spoke at the Republican Party, had a pretty bright red dress on and camouflage high heels. Okay, underneath it, Tammy Duckworth. Tammy Duckworth is a senator from Illinois. And she was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, lost both legs and part use of her arm. These are the congresswomen. The women I'm showing you now are in Congress. Next slide. Chrissy Houlihan was in the Air Force, did a lot with basketball. Down here, Tulsi Gabbard was in the Army, and she ran for the president. She has gotten out since now and went back, took another job as a recruiter in the Army. Next slide. I always have to remember this lady's name. Well, maybe I don't remember it. Houlihan. No, that was Houlihan. One of the, she was in the Air Force. She's a federal prosecutor. And then the last one, this is Elaine Lurie, and she's Democrat Virginia. She was in the Navy, joined the Navy at 17. Special warfare, and she's a nuclear engineer. Next slide. And that was my favorite, who did not get reelected, Martha McSally, first A-10 fighter pilot in the Air Force, first woman to be a leader of a squadron of an A-10 unit. Now, I can tell you, These are strong congresswomen. They know how to hold their own. They're doing good. Next slide, quickly. Joni Linden, first female fighter pilot in the Air Force. Fantastic lady, heard her talk. One of the things she was saying about when she was flying in Afghanistan, Iraq, she would go to a base to land, call in for landing, and the men in the tower would not speak to a woman. So she would have to cut to one of her cohorts, have them call in and have them get the coordinates and stuff to get her to land. Little problems that women are facing nowadays. Army women are having problems with body armor because it's built for men. Next slide. I think this woman is fantastic. Tammy Jo Schultz, you always heard of Sully Sullenberger. She was flying the Southwest airline pilot when the engine failed and part of the airplane blew off. And one of the passengers was being sucked out and they were holding the passenger in, pulled her in. The passenger died. But the co-pilot said, oh my gosh, we're going down. She said, no, we're going to Philadelphia. And took the airplane, landed it with all the problems in Philadelphia. Unbelievable. She was the first F-18 Hornet pilot in the Navy. So, I mean, some of these women veterans are tough. I got it good. I saw more. Okay, next slide. Now, the question is the military right for people nowadays? And I think you have a question. First, if you want to get rich, forget it. If you're faint at heart, forget it. It's going to work. But if you have a young one, a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, grandkid, whoever, neighbor, they don't know if they should join the military. What if somebody took your kid and said, okay, what we're going to do is give this kid an aptitude test, see what they're good at. And if they're good at something, we are free of charge. We're going to send them and we're going to train them. In this course, we're going to give them discipline. We're going to make sure they're in a drug-free environment. We're going to make sure they are in good shape and healthy. And we're going to train them. And oh, by the way, while we train them, we're going to pay them. Wow. And oh, we're going to provide them housing. And oh, by the way, we'll give them free medical care. And oh, by the way, they can choose to stay in. We'll make sure they're proficient in their job. They can get out after 4 years. And if they get out, we hold nothing against them. We will reward them with a GI Bill, full college paid for, and a VA loan, housing allowance. If they want to stay in, they can. But if some kid like me doesn't know what to do, it's always something to consider. And now they don't have the Space Force there, the new Space Force. Okay, we've got a new signal coming in. And I'm saying if they join the military, you might be able to take something like this and turn it into something like this. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. We have a program called Jill's Books where we ask our presenters to sign a book and then we put it in the public library.
Okay.
So we've got hidden figures for you.
Ooh.
Any other announcements? Doctor, thank you for visiting us. Please come back anytime. We are adjourned. Thanks.